He asks you nicely, just a little favor. It seems harmless, so you agree. Then he comes back again and again, and when you finally say no, you're met with a wounded look, like you just kicked a puppy. Suddenly you feel awful, not because you did something wrong, but because you've been manipulated, not through strength, but through subtle fragility. Niccolo Machiavelli, the mind behind one of history's sharpest analyses of power, studied how leaders rise and how influence operates. But what fascinated him most wasn't brute force. It was the quiet control, the kind wielded by those who seem too vulnerable to be dangerous. The most effective manipulators don't demand. They don't yell. They don't threaten. They simply appear harmless. And that illusion disarms you completely. They don't push. They plead. They don't fight. They retreat. And in the silence, you start rearranging your choices to avoid making them upset. You give in, not because you were coerced, but because you felt guilty not doing so. That's not compassion. That's psychological manipulation at its finest. And Machiavelli would call this emotional warfare, disguised as helplessness. There's a difference between being genuinely weak and turning weakness into a weapon. Most people imagine manipulators as aggressive, dominating personalities, but some of the most controlling individuals present themselves as perpetually broken, endlessly misunderstood, and emotionally fragile. They'll cry right on cue. They'll go silent when you set boundaries. They'll say things like, "I knew you'd leave like everyone else." And it works. Your instincts kick in. You think, "I can't let them down. They need me. If I step back, I'll be the bad guy." But you're not helping them. You're being controlled through your own empathy. Machiavelli would argue that pity can be far more dangerous than fear. You see, fear keeps your guard up. Pity makes you drop it. When someone uses their pain like a spotlight, you begin to walk on eggshells around them. They don't need power. They just need your conscience. And that's how it starts. You say yes once, then again, and again. The moment you stop, the emotional consequences hit. Not directly. There's no yelling or blaming. Instead, they withdraw. They sigh. They go quiet. And in that quiet, you feel the urge to fix things. That's the guilt trap. You adjust yourself not because it's logical, but because peace feels more valuable than your own boundaries. That's not cooperation. That's surrender. They'll never say, "Do this." They'll just make you feel awful if you don't. They won't tell you you're cruel. They'll just act hurt enough that you start wondering if maybe you are. You apologize even when you're not wrong. You over-explain to avoid looking heartless. You mold yourself into their emotional caretaker. And slowly, their needs override yours, without a single demand ever being made. That's not friendship. That's a one-sided contract forged in emotional blackmail. They act like your helper, your admirer. "You're so understanding. I can always count on you. No one else gets me like you do." At first, it sounds like praise. But eventually, it becomes pressure. The next time you say no, they remind you, "I thought you were different. Maybe I was wrong about you." Now, you're no longer operating from love. You're trying to preserve their version of you, the saint, the rescuer, the one who never says no. Your virtues, empathy, patience, responsibility, have become chains. They aren't appreciated. They're exploited. The moment you break character, they act betrayed, not because you wronged them, but because you stopped serving their needs. These people don't explode. They drip poison in tiny doses. They don't shout. They deliver passive slights with a smile. They don't confront. They disappear, delay, dismiss. And every subtle dismissal makes you question yourself. Did I upset them? Should I reach out? Was I too harsh? By the time you're constantly managing their moods, you're no longer in control. They punish without accusation, manipulate without confrontation. Everything stays vague, but it still cuts deep. Machiavelli would call this silent dominance. The most effective control is invisible. So subtle you don't realize it's happening until your own actions feel foreign to you. They don't exploit your flaws. They use your strengths. Your loyalty becomes their shield. Your compassion, their excuse. Your integrity, their protection from consequence. These aren't compliments. They're blueprints. They study you, figure out what drives you, then feed it back to you like bait. And when you finally resist, when you try to reclaim your space, say no, or live for yourself, watch how fast they vanish. No conversation, no attempt at understanding, just emotional withdrawal. Because what they valued wasn't you, it was your compliance. Machiavelli would shake his head and say, "That was never a relationship, that was a leash." Healthy connections survive boundaries. Manipulative ones collapse when you assert them. And the worst part? These games unfold slowly, one favor, one sigh, one silence at a time. That's why they're so hard to spot. So how do you recognize the trap? When someone never owns their part but always expects help. When your no gets translated into emotional abandonment. When your needs are secondary, their crises always urgent. When they remember every time you failed them, but never your sacrifices. When appreciation comes laced with expectation. Machiavelli would warn, real control isn't taken. It's volunteered. By kind, empathetic people who just wanted to help. And the more you explain, the more you arm them. Every reason becomes an opening to guilt trip you later. You had time for others. You didn't need space from them. I guess I don't matter to you anymore. So stop over-explaining. Start enforcing. Say no without a monologue. Step back without a defense. The moment they say, "Wow, I didn't think you'd treat me like this," let silence be your answer. Not to hurt them, but to retrain them. Because every time you give in to guilt, you teach them what works. Emotional manipulators crave reactions. Starve them. Let their silence echo in peace. Don't rush in to fix discomfort that isn't yours. And here's your power move. Flip the emotional script. Stop defending your boundaries. Make them justify their expectations. When they say, "You're never there for me anymore," ask gently, "Why is your definition of support tied to me doing exactly what you want?" That's not cruelty. That's reclaiming your life. Because love without respect becomes duty. Kindness without boundaries becomes servitude. And empathy without awareness becomes enslavement. So let them sulk. Let them stew. Let the silence teach them what your words never could. You are no longer emotionally available for manipulation.